Oh, welcome everyone. My name is Juniper. I'm the managing producer for Feldenkrais Access, and I'm so pleased to be here with Maggy Burrowes for a live chat with you all. We are here today to talk to Maggy about her upcoming series, Inside Matters, a Feldenkrais approach to integrating your core, diaphragms, and ring muscle systems. The first class of the new series will be on Thursday, February 29th. It will be a free class, so please come and join us. We've gotten a few questions in advance for this live chat, so I'll start with those, but please do, as we continue, send your questions into whatever social media platform you're joining us on, and right to Maggy. Maggy, is there anything you'd like to say before we get started?
Hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here and very much looking forward to answering your questions.
Great. So here's our first question. Someone wrote in to ask, so this was somebody who participated in the Secrets of Your Ring Muscle System, which was the workshop you taught in June of 2023. And they are wondering how this class series will be different from that workshop.
Yes, it's a good question, and there certainly will be some overlap. I have always, though, been interested in the way these smaller, subtler, little muscles that are going all the way through our system, controlling everything, are integrated with our sheet muscles, the diaphragm moving up and down, the root of the tongue, the pelvic floor, and very early on in once I'd started being a Feldenkrais practitioner, one of my colleagues said, "Oh, you should really get interested in the psoas muscles. All dancers are interested in their core muscles." And he was working a lot with dancers. And I liked working with dancers, and my ears pricked up. So I got very interested in what our core genuinely was. And I was a little surprised to discover that people were focusing a lot on the muscles that wrap around the outside of the waist, and got very, very interested indeed in these deeper muscles, what I think of as the core, like the core of an apple, the muscles that are wrapped around the spine and keeping everything supported. And these muscles are intimately, deeply involved in what happens as we breathe and what happens as our different pumping systems, the circulation of the blood, the circulation of our lymphatic system that is taking care of our immune function, and the pumping of air, of course, all being connected around this sort of central place. So this is something that's interested me from a very early stage of my teaching, plus very interested in working with the voice, and all of these elements are relevant to the healthy functioning of the voice.
Great, thank you, Maggy. There was a question about something that you were just speaking to, which is about the core. Someone wrote to ask, they have been told, sorry, I'll read it as it was written. I've been told that I need to strengthen my core to help with back pain. How does that fit in with what you are teaching?
So it's exactly the sort of issue that I hope people will come to the course with. And I'll be doing my best to really clarify the relationship between these more internal structures and the skeleton, and how easily we sit and stand and move around and keep our spine in healthy working order. I just have a bit of a question around the idea of whether what the problem is always strength. I think that's often what people go to as a kind of as a very simple idea of what's going on. And if you look at the best thing is to look at young children figuring out how to stand up and balance on their feet and move about. And they're incredibly energetic. They're incredibly live. They've got beautiful long spines, very, very well held heads over nice long necks. If you see them sitting with their parents in coffee shops, they sit bolt upright with no support very comfortably. And that's not because they're strong. It's not about strength in the muscle, but it is about balance. It's about every different muscle and structure all through the system working in coordination with all the others. And that's very much what I want to get into in depth in this course.
Wonderful, Maggie. I was wondering if you could maybe speak some to the relationship between the core muscles and the ring muscle systems that you've been talking about.
Well, certainly they come into very close proximity when you're in the area of the heart, which sits on top of the diaphragm. And then just below there, you have a nervous system nexus, the beginning of the digestive system. Of course, the digestive system is all controlled by sphincter muscles. And then that's all very close to these powerful core muscles, the quadratus lumborum at the back, holding the spine in one place, and the psoas muscles that are the flexors for the hips, very powerful flexors for the hips that are at the front. So there's a kind of physical conjunction. Everything is together very close in one place. But it's more than that. It's more about when you look at somebody running or dancing or moving beautifully, and what you see is a whole self interacting, that it isn't about, in order to be a good tennis player, you don't just move your arm. You learn to move your arm with your whole self. If you're going to swim, you're learning to coordinate arms and legs and spine and breathing and neck all in one, proper context. And it's the same with the sphincters. The sphincters are just as much a part of this whole self system that works in an integrated way. It's just not how we talk about it. We don't talk about it that way often in exercise classes, and doctors don't talk about these things this way. So they talk about them as if these systems are somehow separate, but they were never separate in the first place. They always worked together.
That's great. It's a very optimistic kind of way of thinking about it, right?
Well, I think what it does is, the wonderful thing about a system is if something goes wrong in one place, you can approach it from somewhere else in order to make the improvement that you're looking for. And this is one of the things we go into in a lot of detail in this course, that if you feel there's something less responsive about a lower sphincter, a digestive sphincter, you can approach it by working on the functionality and the health of the sphincters of your eyes, or the sphincters organizing your lips. So it gives you more than one way in to whatever's going on. And then if somewhere feels a little obscure to you, it's not in your awareness, you can approach it in a sneaky side way from a much easier place.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maggie. Griff has written a question into YouTube. They ask, will the course address issues of incontinence and prolapse?
It's not a medical course. It's a movement, using movement training in order to get these systems back into full integration. But it will address all of those areas. So we'll be looking at how the pelvic floor works. We'll be looking at what helps the urethra, the front sphincter, and the anus, the rear sphincter. We'll be looking at what helps them work, what helps them stay coordinated and functional. And we'll be looking at the way bigger movements of the spine can help you integrate these areas so that they work better. Prolapse is, I think, a bit more complicated, but I'm certainly prepared to talk about that with people if there's something like that going on. I am very confident that these things can be healed. I think you often need more than one approach, but I think this approach is one that you can do for yourself in a way that is very available, that you can do it every day, and that you can monitor for yourself how well it's working. So, you've got a proper tool at your disposal, a self-help tool that you can access anytime you need it. And then if maybe there's something a little more complex that needs to be added in, you're already giving yourself support and protecting yourself to a certain extent. But I particularly think that what we're doing in this course will also be useful for people who are concerned not to have these kinds of problems develop in the first place. So I think I'll hopefully be sharing things that people will find preventative as well as curative.
I'm glad you said that, Maggie, because we had a previous question from someone who asks if I don't have any issues, any problems that I'm facing, will this class series still be helpful for me?
Oh, goodness, yes. And not just helpful, it should be fun. That's the thing. But it's often, in our culture, there's often a kind of assumption that the deteriorations that some of us experience as we get older are inevitable. They often talk about them as if there's no way of avoiding them. And yet we live these lives where we're not moving the way we evolved to move. We're not squatting on the floor. We're not climbing trees. We're not running regularly. Okay, some people get up and run long distances, but there's actually enormous benefit to just sprinting in terms of how well your internal functioning is going on. So still being able to run for the bus, as I do at the age of 62, these are the things you want to be hanging on to and keeping in your life. And Feldenkrais is, or not just this course, all Feldenkrais is all about that. It's all about keeping these things, not what do they say? Use it or lose it. In Feldenkrais, we use it, we use a lot of it, we use more of it, and we have fun using it.
Excellent, Maggie. We have another question from someone who wrote in about incontinence, and they are asking, I am concerned that if I relax too much, it will be harder to control my bladder. Do I need to strengthen or relax?
I don't think it's really in those terms. I think it's coordinate. It's getting the coordination of all the sphincter systems through your whole self so that they're working more efficiently. So strength is such an interesting question because, these are areas that even on ourselves, we don't touch very often. So we don't engage with them in a very physical way. And we don't really enjoy it if we have to go to the doctor and the doctor touches us in those areas. But if you do examine yourself, you'll notice these muscles are strong, particularly the ones you can observe. They have a lot of physical power. It's much more about the coordination of the whole system being at its most effective. That's the thing that really makes a difference. So you don't want one part of the system to have broken down and to just let that, acid reflux is a sign that something's going on. You want to tackle that. You don't want to ignore it. If you regularly have problems swallowing, you want to tackle that. You don't want to ignore it. It may not be something you can bring back to, 100%, but it's always worth being aware that if something breaks down somewhere in the system or is working less well somewhere in the system, that's a signal to you that there are things you can do to change it. And, there's a lot of courses up on Facebook at the moment. There's a lot of people talking about incontinence on Facebook at the moment. It's very interesting that there's so much information out there about it. I'm absolutely certain that what I'm offering will give you a chance to prevent those kinds of situations from developing in the first place. And that it won't be about how muscular you get and how strong you are. In fact, what I remember is that it's often not helpful to make these muscles too hard and strong and rigid. And I agree with you. You also don't necessarily want them to be too soft and flabby and elastic either. But I don't think either of those are what we're aiming for. I think what we're aiming for is a nice crisp to the whole system. Oh, everything's working together the way it developed to work together. And if you look again, I bring up babies because babies haven't had a chance for things to go wrong, hopefully, most of the time. So you watch a baby crying and you see the whole undulation that we're playing with as they cry, and everything through the chest and belly and face, everything's working. They don't try and do things in bits. They don't try and do things in parts. They're not separated out the way we often end up as we get older. So yeah, we'll hopefully we'll be balling freely through our whole system like babies by the end of the 6 weeks, able to wail with the best of them.
We got a message from Nadia on YouTube who writes in to say, I love these ideas, so essential, beautifully explained, balance, coordinate, preventive, not just curative.
Oh, thank you, Nadia. Yeah, that's what I love about it.
Susan wrote a question. She is asking, I have very stiff hips and rising and going upstairs and a painful connection between my right thigh connected at the groin. Not quite a question, but it sounds like there's a question in there.
It does. It does. And it sounds like it's sort of certainly adjacent to what we're doing, if not exactly what the course is about. Um, yes, what would I say about that? I certainly think that it's worth being aware of just how close these structures are to the hip joints themselves. And there certainly are connections. There are connections that come up from the soles of the feet, to the backs of the calves, the insides of the thighs, and then to the hip joints, and then on up through all the way through to the tongue. We have a kind of deep inner channel of connection going all the way through. It's certainly worth trying the course, I would say, and seeing if it helps. But that sounds to me like almost any Feldenkrais course would be good to take on. It's really, you know, in Feldenkrais, we're always looking at the whole self. We're not looking at bits in that particular way. So even a workshop that seems to be about shoulders and the neck might very well help you with issues that are going on in the hips and the legs, simply because there's nothing that's really separate within us. But yeah, I would, without saying that this is necessarily the perfect course, I would say Feldenkrais is what you are looking for. And you may find up on the Feldenkrais Access website that there's a course that's already been done that is well worth you looking at for those particular issues. But yes, we will be looking at the movements of the pelvic floor, movements of the lumbar spine, movements of the abdomen, free breathing. All of that will influence the hips.
Thank you, Maggie. Another question that we received previously is from someone who writes, I have a hard time lying on the floor. Will I be able to do these classes?
Yes. First of all, a great percentage anyway can be done sitting up, leaning back on a comfortable chair if you want to. Could be done in a wheelchair if you wanted to. But I also want to look at some slightly more challenging movements. And one of the great things about these courses is you'll have somebody demonstrating the best way to do this from a chair. So there will be, you know, proper support if getting up and down from the floor is difficult. But a lot of what we're doing will work very well in a chair. This course could be done, a very great deal of this course could be done sitting rather than lying, if that made it easier for you. Or I often like to say to people, you can do it lying on a bed quite often. It doesn't always have to be a very hard surface you're lying on if it's not so hard for you to lie on a bed rather than the floor. But I definitely want to include some ideas about going from the chair towards the floor to get in a little bit of what might make the floor become more accessible over time with a little bit of practice, so that you've got a bit more to work with. Going, you know, what would be the word, you know, looking at the stages of being from sitting to being, say, on hands and knees or squatting, and giving you at least some of those stages to play with, even if you can't do all of them.
And I'll just add to that to say that for the entirety of the course series, there will be someone demonstrating the movements that Maggie is offering in a seated position. So if you need to translate the suggestions for each class series into a seated position, you'll be able to see how the practitioner who's doing that does it.
Yeah, it's very, very useful for people, I think.
I hope so. I think so too. We have another question that came in on YouTube from Sandra. This sounds so good. Are you able to provide any individual direction in the space of the live online course?
Okay, that's an interesting. What we have usually is a team, a support team who do that, don't we? So because I will be, in a sense, doing the broadcasting, it won't necessarily be something that I can do with, you know, the last course I did, I think there were 200 and plus people there, weren't there? So I didn't get to see everyone all the time. But there's a team in place who are watching everybody all the time and available to answer questions in the chat. And then if that isn't enough, if that doesn't give you enough support, you can go into another space with one of the people who's supporting and get proper one-to-one support that way as well. Does that cover it, do you think, Juniper? You know how well set up this particular part of the system is.
Yes, I can speak to the support organization that we have for the live classes, which is that we have practitioners who are assisting Maggie in her teaching, so that if you have questions during the live class, you can reach out during the live class, but then you can also reach out through the Feldenkrais Access platform. If you've registered for the class, you'll always be able to reach Maggie through that platform whenever you have a question. So if you're engaging with the lessons after live classes ended, you aren't entirely on your own. You can reach out and send a message, and Maggie will receive those questions and get back to you. And then you can always write into communications at Feldenkrais Access whenever you have a question. So you can always reach us, and you can reach Maggie through that email as well as through the platform on the Feldenkrais Access.
I had a feeling I was forgetting something. I also wanted to say that somebody asked about the previous course that I did. It was just an afternoon's workshop in the summer. What I like about this is it's spread out over 6 weeks. As your questions develop, you can send them to me, and anything that I feel is useful can then be woven into what I'm teaching through the whole 6-week course. So I'm really going to enjoy that interactive aspect, which we couldn't quite do in the same way when it's a one single afternoon.
And there will also be 2 live Q&A sessions for the class series. So if you attend the live Q&A session, you'll be able to ask questions to Maggie directly in that format, but you can also submit your questions through the question submitting link in advance of the Q&A, and I'll read Maggie your question on your behalf.
Excellent.
Great.
I need a sip.
Yes, please. So Sandra follows up. She says, wonderful. I've only done pre-recorded courses, and she's looking forward to the course.
Oh, lovely. Lovely.
Glad you'll be joining us, Sandra. And Nadia wrote to ask, she would like to hear you on how learning and doing these lessons pertains to physical proficiency.
That's a very general term. Physical proficiency, I think of as being related to something in particular. So I'll speak a bit generally, and then if she needs to follow up with more question, then she can do so. So physical proficiency is partly, I think, how aware we are of what we're doing. And I think of this course as particularly focusing on that, developing more whole self internal awareness. And then it is about not just how much practice we do, but how we practice. And the thing that I think is particularly powerful about Feldenkrais is that it teaches you the very efficient ways to practice to speed up the learning process. So that if I'm understanding the word in the way you mean it, when you become proficient, you become good at something in a way that develops over time. And with Feldenkrais, what happens is that you get a better understanding of how learning happens. One of the interesting things about learning is a habit is something that you've learned, and if you wish to change a habit, how do you unlearn it? You know, it's been embedded into your nervous system. Your brain knows. So many people know this, knows the automatic way to work, so that if you want to go somewhere else, but it starts the same, the journey, you can find yourself halfway to work before you remember that you were going somewhere else. So the idea of being aware of awareness through movement, that you notice more easily and you notice more quickly exactly what you're doing. Feldenkrais had a catchphrase, a not easy to understand catchphrase, I think, simply because it sounds too simple. If you know what you're doing, you can do what you want. And in Feldenkrais classes, we do our best to help you really get a clear sense of what you're doing, Right, am I sitting on my sitting bones? Am I breathing through my nose? Something that you can't easily do when you're talking, by the way. Am I lifting my shoulders up as if I'm trying to support something? Am I am I slightly tilting my head back because I'm a glasses wearer? This is why I'm wearing my contact lenses today. But you know, the things you do when you wear glasses. I used to poke myself in the eye when I was wearing my contact lenses because if something was blurry, I was used to pushing my glasses up so I could see. So I just go straight into my own eye. So unlearning habits that you want to change usually requires replacing them with something. And Feldenkrais gives you strategies to do that, to replace the thing you no longer want to be doing with the thing you would prefer to be doing. But it does take practice. Proficiency requires practice. But I'm sure you know that.
We have another question that came in on YouTube from Nicole, who asks, I have mysterious low back pelvic discomfort. Will this be safe for me as far as you can tell, or is there another series you would suggest?
Oh, this should be safe. This should be safe. There might be positions where you would want to take advantage of you know, doing them in the chair rather than doing them on the floor. And it's always important in Feldenkrais to focus on your own comfort, to only move as far as you feel comfortable moving, to rest as often as you want to. So to never be stoical is how I often put it. Don't keep pushing through. I think it's a real problem if we've been in pain for a while in a way that is there in our daily life in such a way that we get used to putting up with it. Even if in your daily life you're putting up with a bit of discomfort, it's really powerful in Feldenkrais to not push through anything, push against resistance, to just be very, very minimal. And, you know, you can't be too minimal. You can do a lot of this work in your imagination. And one of the things I will be doing through the 6 weeks is reminding people of that whenever it's useful and appropriate to do so. But it's always very useful to know if someone's having any difficulty, and that's what the team is there for, because that will remind me to say to people, just be very, very gentle with yourself. If you find the place where you can move with a little bit of comfort, it sends that message of comfort into the nervous system, and it can start to reverse. Everyone here, all of us who do Feldenkrais, you know, we've discovered this for ourselves, and this is why we're a little bit evangelical about it, is because we know it works, because we've eased our own pains very gently using exactly this kind of work. So I would say this might be the ideal course, but again, there will be other courses on the Feldenkrais Access website that will also be good. And to not give up on the idea that you can be better, even if it feels a bit mysterious and you don't know what's going on now. To just, I think it's very important to listen to these messages that our physical self sends us, saying, this isn't comfortable, this isn't easy, I'm not happy with this. There's something very interesting about pain that's quite complicated and a bit outside my brief because I'm not a physio. But I do listen to physios talking about pain, and there's something very interesting about it because the pain is a message, and it's a message that has an optimistic element to it, because when the pain comes, it's because your system believes you can do something about it. People have fascinating stories about losing a limb on the battlefield and not feeling it at all. And it's partly because there's nothing to be done. So pain is a little message to say, yes, something needs to change. Let me help you figure it out. Yeah, yeah. I hope that makes some sense, and I hope that's of some use. I write on my website, and I've written quite a few articles about pain to try and get some of this across, because it's fascinating the way pain works. It's very interesting, but it's, you know, we live in a culture that thinks that we should just suppress our symptoms all the time. And of course, if you're in pain and you're in a great deal of discomfort, it's completely natural to want to suppress it. But the pain is a message. It is an important message, and it's telling you something very valuable if you can find a way to hear it and use that information for your own benefit, because that's what it's for your benefit. But I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm certainly not saying, oh, never take painkillers. That's not what I mean at all. But I do think that the pain is a useful signpost towards the kind of change you might need to make in order to make your life better.
That's really beautiful, Maggie. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, we've all experienced pain, I'm sure. I know it's one of the main things that brings people to the Feldenkrais world.
Yeah, and it makes us human.
Yeah.
Daphne wrote on Facebook, she is practicing wonderful self-care, and she says that even though practitioners sometimes instruct to lie on the floor, she lies on her bed.
Yeah, bed's good. Love the bed. Nothing wrong with the bed. Feldenkrais used to do a lot of Feldenkrais in bed. He didn't call it Feldenkrais then, of course.
That would be funny. Well, great, Maggie. That's all the time we have, but thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and ideas and inspirations with us. And I hope all of you who joined us today will join us on February 29th at 12 p.m. Eastern US time for the first class in Inside Matters with Maggy Burrowes.
I'm really looking forward to it, and thank you all for all your questions. They were wonderful.